We only reason things that we believe, and we believe what we can see or observe. So why is it that we still choose to ignore the most deadly and yet the most observable evidence that we are damaging one of the oldest natural cycles operating on this planet? Carbon dioxide is a colorless and odorless gas, which is much necessary for the existence of any kind of life on Earth. For a century now, we have known about this necessary evil. It forms a major part of the carbon cycle, which is one of the earliest natural cycles operating on the planet. Aside from the fact that plants require CO2 like we require oxygen, there is a much more important function that CO2 serves in our atmosphere. It can absorb some of the energy contained in the infrared radiation, which leads to an increase in its temperature. This increase in temperature heats up the atmosphere and in turn keeps our Earth warm and a cozy place to live in. It is also responsible for the management of much of the climate cycles. Without this property of CO2, the Earth would have been a snowball covered in ice. The catch, however, is that the concentration of CO2 should be in the range of 250 to 350 parts per million in order to keep the Earth warm and keep various climate cycles under normal conditions. For much of our civilization and the ones before us, this concentration remained within its ideal safe limits. But in the 20th century, it was observed that the CO2 levels in the atmosphere rose sharply, and this is where things turn evil. Each year, the increase in the concentration of CO2 was so steep that many of us got concerned about the harms that this change could bring. Scientists estimated that such increase in the levels of CO2 would cause global warming, which would give rise to problems of its own. But the question was, when and how would this affect us? Scientists predicted that its effects would start to show up after 2030 or perhaps after 2050 or even later. And maybe that is why we did not care. We thought we had time to figure out the solution, but as it has turned out, global warming has already started to show its effects in the form of climate change, and we are not even close to its earliest predictions. But what actually did advance this process by a few decades? To find this answer, we need to know the source of this excessive amount of CO2 that suddenly entered the atmosphere. Some experts said that this could be attributed to volcanic activities, deforestation, and the increasing human population. But researchers all over the world found that these reasons could only explain about 2% of the CO2 in our atmosphere, whereas the unaccounted levels were a staggering of 30 to 40 billion tons of CO2 each year. This is where things get interesting. Could we actually dump nearly 100% more carbon dioxide than all the active volcanoes on this planet combined? The answer is yes, we could, and we did. In fact, we have been doing this for a few decades now, and the rate has been ever increasing every year. This could be a little hard to believe, but when we compare the increase in the levels of atmospheric CO2 and the rate at which we are burning fossil fuels, we find that the data matches. What more? When the increase in the atmospheric CO2 and the observed global warming data is tallied, the results match. We can be pretty sure that we are the ones who are adding this large amount of CO2 in the atmosphere through relentless burning of fossil fuels for our greed and comfort. Maybe it is difficult to acknowledge the presence of CO2 all around us because it is a colorless gas. If only it had color, if we could see it, perhaps only then we could overcome the denial and grasp the magnitude of our impact on the atmosphere. The evidence that the Earth is warming up lies all around us. For starters, weather stations around the globe have been keeping reliable temperature data since the 1880s. The data tells us that the average global temperature is rising, and most of it, guess what, has been in the recent years itself. NASA has used this data to compile a map that shows the evolution of average temperature of the planet with time. Yellow indicates temperature that is warmer than average, orange means hot, red means hotter. And clearly, the world is getting hotter and hotter with each passing day. We have seen weather break century-old records at many places on Earth within a single year, and that is just weather. We cannot even imagine the effect climate change is going to have on our civilization. Record droughts, heavy storms, strong heat waves, and whatnot. We might be very close to tipping the climate scale to a point of no return. Unlucky for us, the main waste product of our civilization is not just any substance. It happens to be the chief climate regulating substance of the global thermostat. If we don't change our ways now, we might be much closer to a global disaster than we think we are. But what can we do on a personal level to avoid this? To learn the answer, we request you to subscribe to our channel because that is what our next video is going to be about. Thank you for watching till the end, and we hope to see you again soon. Goodbye and TATHASTU.